Okay, I've taken the quote at the start of this short video about faith and reason from one of the A-level specs. I think it's Excel or somebody. But it's a very common idea that I thought was rather compelling. The idea that we should believe things on the grounds of reason rather than faith. Um, it seems when we first read it like a truism, like it shouldn't. Obviously, in the modern world, we should believe things because we have good reasons for doing so. We have a rational account, and we should base our views about the world, our views about other people, and our views of a religious nature on the same rational grounds. That seems fine, but and sensible to most of us. But I wanted to problematize it, make it seem like perhaps it isn't as straightforward as it looks, on at least two grounds. The first ground, which is rather short, is from a tradition that I'm particularly interested in, which is in Buddhism. And of course, in the Buddhist tradition, not only does it want to say blind faith, it respects some kinds of faith quite a lot, actually, but blind faith is problematic, but it also seems to talk about reason. It talks in the Kalama Sutta, for example, and elsewhere, about mere reason, or people translate it as mere reason. Because there's an idea that the grounds on which one should accept things as true are provisional faith, but not blind faith, but not necessarily pure reason on its own. The grounds for accepting things as true in a lot of Theravada Buddhist analyses seem to be experiential verification. Like, temporarily believe something's true if you want to, and it might be that there are things that Buddhism recommends it's beneficial to believe is true, and other things it believes are problematic to believe is true, but then go and test them. Subject these beliefs to meditational verification. So both blind faith and reason might be jettisoned in favour of this might not sound quite the best way, of a kind of an epistemic third way in Buddhism. So there's that objection that you could investigate or explore. But I also wanted to investigate the idea that we have in the modern world, and is very common, that religions make rational claims which are subject to rational arguments in both ways. You could argue that the big to-do, that's rather an old-fashioned way of talking about it, the big distinction or set of arguments between contemporary atheism and contemporary attempts at providing a rational form of theism are both equally guilty of falling down this hole, if that's what you believe it to be, of believing that religious belief is a matter of rational argument and that therefore they can sort it out by arguing. And they certainly do plenty of that. There's been a lot of arguing. So there's that, but I think both sides in this, rational theist and a certain form of anti-theistic atheism, are ever more prone to treating religious faith as merely a matter of correspondence theory truth. Religious faith is just about who can prove their claims, who can't disprove of the claims, what are there good rational grounds for believing this or not good rational grounds for believing that. And I'm not sure that's the full story, this idea that we can therefore get rid of blind faith in favour of reason. And it seems a very kind of enlightenment view of things, not that's a bad thing necessarily, but to say the age of blind faith has passed and we're now just in a time of reason. Now, in thinking about this, I'm often drawn back to the work of an individual philosopher, which is Soren Kierkegaard. And after the European Enlightenment of the 18th century, we had this idea of the primacy of logic, reason. Religious institutions want to promote themselves as being reasonable, and there is a doing down of blind faith. No one wants to see themselves as just someone who has blind faith. People want to promote themselves as reasonable. That continues to the present day. That we have to fulfill what we might call an epistemic duty to our beliefs. You shouldn't go around believing things in the absence of solid reasons that you can reproduce if challenged to hold those beliefs. And that leads us to where we are for many in the present day. The denigration of faith and the promotion of the idea of rational argument. But let's look at religion differently. Let's look at religion how, at least in part, Kierkegaard does. He says that religion doesn't start as a rational consideration on what is the more likely perspective to hold, which statement, which proposition, I guess, is more rational. He rather starts with religion as an engagement with a set of existential realities. The things that we don't reason, but we feel. We feel, if we've got any sense, doubt, fear, uncertainty, despair. That's what being human's about. It's about being in this pit of unknowing and confusion and fear. And he wants to challenge the notion that being reasonable is the challenging, difficult thing. Whereas the person of faith has it easy. There's this kind of stereotype that it's easy to go around just believing stuff. The difficult thing is to argue these things out, to work out what the correct thing is. The person of faith too lazy to think, they just accept what they've been told. The view we start to get from Kierkegaard, and I think it's kind of intriguing, is that it's the other way round. His view that it's all very well going around believing things you have evidence for, but that requires no commitment from the thinker. Try believing something you haven't got evidence for. Really believing it, not in a lazy way of just like, oh, whatever, I'll believe stuff because I've been told to, but really taking seriously something for which you don't have evidence. So he argues it's easy to go around believing things there's evidence for because there's good reason to. But having belief in something without evidence, really, really believing something profoundly in such a way that's life-changing, without evidence, having that kind of faith is hard. Something you don't think we can't currently prove, but is unprovable or beyond these kind of realms of proof and unproof. This leap of faith that this demands is serious. It requires a certain level of what we might call intellectual or spiritual bravery. And that should make us reconsider the claims of, say, New Atheism and rationalist forms or rational forms of theism to say, actually, religion isn't about replacing blind faith with reason. It's about getting rid of this idea of blind faith, as this term blind is very insulting or problematic. It's an attempt to understand that religious faith is something other than according with the proposition on the grounds that there are rational grounds for doing so, but a different kind of thing. It's about choosing to believe something because of the transformatory nature it has in one's life and the world, but also choosing to believe it as absolutely true or substantially true in the absence of evidence. And that's why, in a sense, believing for Kierkegaard isn't an easy thing you sign up to because you happen to believe it. It's something you choose. You choose to believe it, and that's really, really hard because it won't be proven. You can't argue about it. It lies beyond argument. It's something I choose to believe. So I think a simplistic contrasting of faith and reason leads us away from, I think, what he argues, and what I think are also quite convincing, important truths about the nature of faith we do well to remember, given the polarizing nature and the shouty nature of the debate between a rational defender of theism on one hand and an account of atheism on the other hand that talks only about whether we can prove or not prove things.